Fred Dodsworth. The writing speaks for itself. Fred Dodsworth.
I didn't time this, so I brought 3 pieces. I'm going to read 2, and maybe I'll read the 3rd, if I've got time. Not enough people write good poetry about abortions.
Yeah.
This is called Two Views of Heaven, D and C. It's a 2-part poem, but I'm only going to read this part. We were alone in a white room. We were nervous. At least I was nervous. She might have felt something else, but we weren't talking about that. We were alone, but we knew we were not going to be alone for long. Frankly, we weren't even really alone. There were just the 2 of us. There weren't just 2 of us. The room was infused with the presence of the other despite the daylight from the outside, which flooded the room despite the fogged white windows, despite the bright white light of the overhead. Despite the brilliant, gleaming shine of everything in the room, despite the white gown she wore like an angel, but this angel wasn't floating in heaven. That wasn't an angel in dreams. We weren't singing gospel songs of praise and hallelujah or kumbaya or come together or anything celebratory, whatever. We were quiet. We were quick, too quick, when we wanted to be quiet. We were still, but not still enough. At least I wanted to be still and quiet. She said she agreed, but I still don't know, despite that she still says so many years later. She says, that was long ago. Now we are gray, but then everything was white, nothing was right, and everything not white was clear, nothing was clear. Everything not clear was chrome. This thing would not be chromed or bronzed or plated with gold. There was always a heartbeat in that room. There will always be a heartbeat in that room. The heartbeat emanated from a large, clear jar. A thumpa, thumpa, thumpa went the pumpa. That was the problem. The pump was like a heartbeat. Soon someone entered and smiled and asked her if she was comfortable. No one asked me nothing. She smiled thinly, palely, and agreed. I said nothing. This won't take long, the professional smile dressed in white said, smiling again. Just lay back and try to get comfortable. No one was comfortable. The heartbeat pounded thumpa, thumpa, thumpa. She sucked in her breath and held it. I sucked in my breath and held it. The heartbeat of the pump kept going thumpa, thumpa, thumpa. I can still hear it. This is a little longer. Actually, this is a lot longer. His name is Roy. He's profoundly disabled, but he's very sweet and gentle, the woman tells her. I just need someone to give me a hand a few days. We could really use your help, really. Amelia hadn't considered the possibility she might end up an au pair for a disabled man her own age. He looks huge and thick, she thinks. Very, very solid. His neck is almost as wide as his head, his broad, slumped shoulders capping arms like tree trunks. Even his face is square and wide, with wide-set honey brown eyes and a thick fleshiness that would have been attractive in a more conventionally situated man. But he isn't a man, she thinks. He's a powerfully enormous boy, completely dependent on others, on her if she takes the job. He can dress himself and feed himself, but he needs to be watched closely as his decision-making process isn't quite sound, his mother continues. He doesn't talk much, but he understands everything. You won't have a problem communicating with him. She had envisioned herself caring for young children. She had pictured their perfect little sunshiny faces, their bright sparkling eyes, their milk-scented breaths. She imagined reading to them, taking them to the park, helping them get ready for school, or putting them to bed at night while their moms, the elegant, sophisticated moms of wealth and privilege, rushed off to benefit dinners for starving children from South America while wearing $10,000 gowns and while babbling musically in perfect French over their shoulders as they dashed out the door. This is Tony Palo Alto, home to Facebook gazillionaires, fabulously wealthy VC titans from Sand Hill Road, and the captains of successful Silicon Valley high-tech companies. Despite his disability, Amelia sees a quiet spark in Roy, an interest in his surroundings subtly expressed in minute movements of his head and eyes. He observes her and his mother slyly rather than shyly, seeming not to look. There is more here than first impressions, she thinks. She could be useful here. They could use her. She would be needed. Not some frightened, anorexic young woman floating through life like dandelion fluff, in her own way with her long, lean, muscular frame. Amelia is as solid and sturdy and strong as Roy is in his way. With her sleek, well-tanned arms, Pacific Trail hiker's legs, and lustrous brunette hair set off with natural reddish streaks, she manifests the demeanor of a natural woman who rolls with life's punches. When she opened the thick brown packet informing her she'd been accepted to Stanford's graduate-level learning, design, and technology program, a frightfully expensive institution, she immediately set to work looking for a part-time job to help with the expenses fellowships and grants wouldn't cover. Au pair is just a fancy word for babysitter, but the pay is better than the $10 an hour a high school student might get. $20 to $40 an hour for the right family in Palo Alto or Menlo Park is the going rate if you're not a live-in, she was told. Zillow claims there isn't a home in the area worth less than $2 million. She looked. Certainly the mommies and daddies splayed across the Palo Alto News' society page, attending benefit dinners, catered parties, European vacations, posing beside their $100,000 sports cars, would pay at least that much to keep their little darlings, their Dylans and Madisons and Taylors, engaged, healthy, and alive. Like the mommies she hoped to work for, she speaks French. With younger sisters, she has experience managing children, and she was pursuing an advanced degree in childhood education. She likes children. No, that's not right. Amelia loves children. She loves them so much she could almost eat them up. She loves to open their bright little eyes to the beauty of this world. She loves to share their joy. They would be her flowers in bloom, and she would revel in introducing them to the sublime mysteries of the universe. The bugs that scatter beneath dead leaves, the manner in which butterflies emerge from caterpillars, how the lights in the night sky are actually stars in galaxies light years away, comprised of millions of other stars. Teaching her precious charges about the world is important, but not as important as creating a place where her wards can feel that sense of safety and security that will in turn make them better people. Every child deserves as much. Surely the parents of such children agree. But here she is. School starts in a week, and she still isn't settled in a position. A well-managed, wealthy family isn't in the market for an au pair the week before the school year begins. Their children are on a waiting list for preschool before they get pregnant. If little Madison doesn't get into the right preschool, she won't be accepted into the right elementary school. If she's not in the right elementary school, there's no hope of getting her into the right high school. And without graduating with honors from the right high school, how can anyone expect her to get into the right college, which in the end is every parent's goal? Amelia's interviews had not been many or promising. There were reasons these people needed help so late in the season. One woman wanted a house cleaner as well as childcare. She was viciously cheap and insisted Amelia refer to her as your mommy. She said she didn't want her children to be confused about who was their mother. As horrible as mommy was, she was a saint compared to the morose single father of a sullen 6-year-old who had been Amelia's only other interview. Beside the man's uncomfortable resemblance to a fellow she'd known in college, Throughout the entire interview, his little boy scowled at Amelia. Brows pinched and furrowed, mouth turned into the sort of sour grimace one rarely sees in a child. On more than one occasion, tears trembled on the little boy's eyelashes. The father repeatedly explained that the two of them were all alone, emphasizing all alone, while explaining that goddamn whore ran off with some tennis trash she met at the university club. Between complaints about his ex, he repeatedly announced he didn't know how to take care of a child. That had always been her job. And that whore promised she'd take the little man as soon as she got her living situation sorted out. But it's been 5 weeks already, and my work isn't happy about how things are working out. And there'll be real problems if I don't sort the situation out pronto. What would happen to then, he demanded of Amelia. Can you imagine? While the child was clearly in over his head, Amelia wanted to help the little boy in what was obviously a difficult situation. She ended the interview abruptly when the father began to ask about, quote, the romantic experiences of women her age. He insisted it was just a matter of trust, but he hadn't shown interest in the child-tending experiences of women her age. During her freshman year in college, a similarly self-entitled fellow had decided she owed him and had tried to take what he felt he was owed. But Amelia was stronger than she looked. When he tried to drag her into his dorm room, she kneed the fellow as hard as she could, the crotch. He screamed at her that she was a whore and he was going to make her pay. Frightened, she caught him off balance and pushed him over. When he hit the ground, she kicked him in the head and then ran like hell. For the next 3 years, she was constantly vigilant, worried he'd make good on his threat to get revenge. That was no way to live, and there was no way in hell she was going to let a situation like that happen again. With so few other options, Roy's mother, her name is Rebecca, seems like a winner. She tells Amelia she just wants a break once in a while, a little time off each day to tend to the responsibilities she has to defer while keeping Roy engaged and out of trouble. Amelia is moved by Rebecca and her strange large boy with his thick muscularity, his short-cropped reddish blonde hair, his Coke bottle glasses. He looks like an engineer, a prototypical dork, the sort of dork young women can find adorable. Not the first boyfriend material, but maybe eventual boyfriend material, after a young woman is burned through the hipsters and the damaged boys and the wild boys and the sexy boys. But Roy will never be that boy, Amelia thinks. His wide, empty smile hides nothing but a wide emptiness. What goes on in there, Amelia wonders. She can see he's not insensate. She can see he's paying attention to her. She wants to ask Rebecca if Roy's problem is mechanical. Perhaps some part of his brain got miswired or damaged. Then again, maybe Roy's problem is not organic. Maybe his problem is social, the sort of autism that might make him like a wax mask hiding a real face. She might make a difference here. Her field of interest, her education, might play a role here. He's not a child, but childlike. Perhaps some of the things she expects to learn in her new master's program could improve his lot. Roy sits quietly beside his mother, while Rebecca speaks to Amelia as if Roy was deaf or in another room. Roy says nothing. To Amelia, his silence suggests someone buried alive. She senses his confusion in the way his eyes dart from one woman to the other, and then away. The way his head tilts as if to see something different with each twist. He avoids her eyes, suggesting a natural shyness. Amelia feels sorry for Roy and his mother and imagines she might reach him where everyone else has failed. This is a place she can do good. These are kind people who have been dealt a difficult hand. It could happen to anyone, she thinks. They need her. She needs them. Her help will make a difference in their lives. Amelia knows she will take the job, no matter what she's offered. She hasn't asked about compensation when Rebecca suggests a generous sum for a few hours a day, 4 days a week. Life is sweet. Here and now she is resolved, ready for school, ready for her future. They quickly settle into a routine. After classes, Amelia comes over to offer respite. Just being there, sharing mother's concern, makes a difference in their lives. Roy acknowledges Amelia's presence and engages her, smiling, petting her arm, hugging her clumsily like a child while she watches him, helps around the house, or sits quietly reading. Her mother notices Roy's attention. "He seems to really like you," Rebecca says. "We get along well," Amelia replies. "No, he seems to be really forming a bond with you," Rebecca says. "You're the first person, other than me, that he really seems to pay attention to care about." Amelia had noticed Roy's attentions. Like many people in his situation, he seemed indifferent, even emotionally disconnected from other people. With Amelia, he was empathetic. He seemed to be careful of her feelings. With animals, he was the softest and most gentle person, whereas with other people, even children, he seemed to be disconnected and indifferent, as if they weren't really even people. Roy's response to her gave Amelia a sense of pride. She was getting through to him. She was making a difference. She smiled, but she didn't reply to Rebecca's comment. "You know, he's not a child. I hope he's not..." No, not that at all," Amelia interrupted. "He's just making some emotional headway. This is a good thing. He's gotten used to me." Rebecca's observations made her uncomfortable. This wasn't about that. Amelia was sure of it. Roy was just developing a natural expansion of his fears of concern and empathy. She was part of the family now. This was a good thing. She was certain of it. Roy was getting better. She was making a difference. Roy, a headstrong man, like a housebound puppy, needed to be exercised. They'd go on walks around the neighborhood. He walks vigorously. They spend hours tromping the urban settings surrounding his home, stomping up and down the sidewalks, marching past the ridiculously expensive homes of his neighbors. Doing this, he has an obsessive intensity and a concentration. He would run, but he is oddly unstable, lurching about as if unable to discern exactly how to remain upright. When he is allowed to hike alongside San Francisco Creek, he is easy in himself and happy. But when the weather or circumstances intervene, he becomes restless and volatile. Rebecca encourages her to avoid the downtown and Stanford shopping mall when she has Roy with her. He likes to go into the stores, but it's too stimulating, Rebecca says. There are too many distractions. He gets easily overwhelmed. It's better not to let him drag you down there. The creek is their untamed miracle in the middle of the built environment. Meandering from the Santa Cruz Mountains to the San Francisco Bay, it is a reminder of all that's natural and wild. Despite its location, it hosts a wide variety of feral life, from gray fox, which avoid humans, to river and pond turtles, also shy, to salmons and skunk who seem indifferent. Roy and Amelia spend hours exploring its banks and beds. She notices the subtle way Roy interacts with the world, easily overlooked in superficial observation. He isn't like the other adults his age, but that doesn't mean he's insensible. He feels as much and reacts to the world he sees, whether it's the dogs or cats, both of which seem to have a predilection for him, or the feral squirrels, birds, and deer. He sees more than most, his quick eyes noting all that surrounds him, engaging the natural world in a manner very different from his response to the human world. One day they stumble upon two turtles mating on a rock in the water. Amelia explains to him that they aren't hurting each other. They're doing what is natural. They're making a family. Roy accepts her explanation without comment, but watches the turtle for several minutes before moving on. "Look, Roy," Amelia says moments later when they've climbed out of the creek. "See the caterpillar?" She's pointing to a 3-inch-long critter with black, white, yellow, and green stripes circumscribing its body, inching and munching its way up a stalk of wild fennel. "You know the butterflies you like, the big, beautiful orange ones? This caterpillar is what those were before they were butterflies." Roy squats next to the fennel bush, closely examining the creeping creature. "That's not a butterfly," he states. He starts to pick it up, but Amelia reminds him the caterpillar is where it belongs, in the wild. Looking closely, they see more on the bush, maybe 10 or 20. There are wild fennels glowing alongside the trail they walk beside the creek. Rushing from plant to plant, they see more and more caterpillars chewing through the landscape. Roy is laughing excitedly, and Amelia feels a welling of love for the whole world, for her beautiful life, for a friend with all his limitations, for her Roy. Looking at her ward, she feels she's playing an important role in his life, helping him find his place in the world that will never accept him as anything but damaged goods. She is doing a good thing. "Let's do an experiment, Roy," she says. "Let's carefully collect a few of these with their stalks of fennel. We'll take them home and watch them form chrysalis and turn into butterflies. Then, when they're butterflies, we can let them free." Roy is exceedingly gentle, breaking off long stalks of fennel without shaking the caterpillars. They collect 9 stalks and return eagerly to his home to show his mother discovery. With his help, Amelia sets up a butterfly habitat in Roy's bedroom. He's deeply engaged. Every day thereafter, they look for fresh fennel to feed Roy's caterpillars, and he spends hours watching them, feeding them. One day he calls to Amelia excitedly. One caterpillar is trying to attach itself to the wall beside his head, near where he sleeps. She carefully picks it up and moves it to a safer place. When they return later in the day, the caterpillar has returned to Roy's bed, right beside his head, where his head will be when he sleeps. Now it is too late. The caterpillar has formed its chrysalis. It can't be moved. Roy is so excited, Amelia is afraid he'll pee himself. Laughing, he announces that the caterpillar wants to be near him. The caterpillar has chosen him. At that moment, Amelia's heart breaks, realizing that this is the first time Roy's had something other than his mother accept him. Her face twists up as she tries to stop her tears, but she's not successful. They streak down her face and drip from her chin. Small, muffled gasps and sobs escape her mouth. Why, she wonders, is life so cruel? What did Roy or Rebecca do to deserve this? She knows they did nothing. The life is just what it is. But she can't stop crying. Roy puts his arms around her and asks her why she's crying. She can't respond. Over the next few days, most, but not all of the caterpillars inch their way to Roy's bed and build the chrysalis on the walls beside his head. He's never been happier or more excited. He smiles much of the time and is willing to follow his mother's and Amelia's requests without argument. His mother gets him a book that follows the life of a butterfly. His reading is limited, but the two women are happy to read to him, and he follows easily the pictures. Now he's more careful about how he moves his body. It's as though there might be butterflies everywhere, and he just can't see them, but he couldn't bear to hurt them. Even in his sleep, he's careful not to roll into their fragile cocoons. 2 weeks later, the first butterfly emerges, its wings all scrunched up, wrinkled and wet. Over an hour or so, the insect stretches and unfolds its wings. Carefully picking it up with the dried stalk of fennel it once fed upon, Roy takes it outside, where it flaps its fragile wings a few trial times before it flies into the sky and disappears. Most, but not all, the chrysalis go through the same transformation, even the one that stayed behind, the one that didn't build its life around Roy. Their relationship has changed. While he doesn't speak much, Roy is more responsive, even more interested in the wide world. He wants more creatures to care for. He wants to see more wild animals change into something new and fly away. Walking along the portion of San Francisco Creek near his home isn't enough. There isn't anything there for him to care for, and he pushes Amelia to go further with him. In one direction, the creek flows into the bay, and the other into the Santa Cruz Mountains. Amelia decides to let him choose. Roy chooses to go west towards Stanford Shopping Mall, towards Stanford University. Amelia goes along with this. The creek goes underneath El Camino Real and then surfaces in woods to the north of the mall. Carefully crossing the busy, wide highway, they march into the woods beside the mall. It's a different world. On the one side is the mall and hundreds of shoppers spending frenetically, piled high with colorful bags and bags full of 21st century must-have products, wandering in the near days from shop to shop, never quite finding what it is they're looking for, but never giving up on their search and their acquisition pursuit. On the other side is like the world was 100 years ago, Trees everywhere so dense, the sound disappears. Small critters and wild birds fill the forest with the rustling of leaves and the twitter of warning. While there's nothing here for Roy to take home with him, in the middle of this neglected, near-forgotten woods, there are two enormous bronze griffins mounted on giant granite plinths. The statues are more than 12 foot tall and green with the oxidation of their ages in the woods. Their wings spread upright, erect, like Roy's butterflies, looking as though they might take off at any moment. Both Amelia and Roy are stunned into silence. How they got here, why they're here, why no one has disturbed them is inexplicable. Amelia has no answers, and Roy asks no questions. They start their return home in silence, exhausted both physically and emotionally. Crossing back into familiar territory, the portion of San Francisco Creek they've explored so often, Roy splashes his way up the bed of the creek, seeming to take solace in its comfortable haunts. Amelia tags along, more a companion than a warden. As they approach their entry point to the creek, his old neighborhood, Roy stops, stares in horror at something in the water. There in the creek bed, looking for all the world like a broken rock, is an 8-inch river turtle that has had its shell stove in by a rock, certainly the result of some destructive child rather than one of its predators. The creek stinks of the decaying flesh of the dead creature. Flies buzz about, landing on the rotting flesh to deposit their eggs. The two stand in silence, staring at the senseless destruction of a creature so harmless. After a long moment, they walk on, still in silence, out of the creek and into the world. As they near Roy's home, Amelia notices an agitated quality in her charge she hasn't seen in a long time. He is restless, not relaxed. His jaw clenched, his eyes clenched, and his brow furrowed. His face has become a mask of determination. Instead of placidly turning into the walkway to his front door, he continues deliberately toward the downtown. Amelia is tired and more than a little depressed. It has been an exhausting day. She needs to study. She's allowed to get herself behind in her reading. The constant, vigilant hypersensitivity to all that might go wrong when she's with Roy takes its toll, and today has been its worst. Now she is ready to call it a day and surrender her charge to his mother. But Roy is moving determinedly toward the forbidden shopping district. Amelia has to trot to catch up with him. Roy, it's time to go home, Amelia says pleasantly but insistently. Roy does not answer, nor does he slow his steady progress toward University Avenue and its shop. Amelia has never raised her voice to her charge, nor has she ever heard his mother speak sharply to him, but she's unsure of any other options. He is far too large and much too strong to physically restrain like a child. She tries again, this time more sternly. Roy, I'm tired. We've walked for hours. It's time to go home. He pays her no attention and continues on toward the downtown steadily. They are now just a little more than a block from the shopping district, and his pace has not even faltered slightly. Roy, Amelia shouts, I said stop! We have to go home! Roy turns on a dime, his mouth open, his eyes wide. Normally he avoids acknowledging the presence of others, even Amelia, even his mother, but this time he directly confronts her. He doesn't say a word, but looks into her face, into her eyes. There is no mistaking it. For the first time, he is there with her, meeting her as an equal. They are in the real world together. Amelia feels overwhelmed. She's never seen him so emotionally naked, so profoundly distressed. She is no longer in control. She doesn't know what to say or do, so she just stands there staring back at him. With an inarticulate moan, he reaches out to her and pulls her into his body, his mouth open, trying to kiss her, pushing his face into hers. He's huge, and his arms surround her, encompass her, prevent her from stepping away. Stop it, she screams. Roy recoils, shocked, dropping to the sidewalk. He squats on his haunches, and lifts both hands up to his head, digging his fingernails deep into his face, ripping 4 symmetrical lines of bleeding flesh off of each side. Blood gushes out, covering his hands, dripping off his wrists and down his chin. He takes on a primitive tribal appearance, like a fierce, bloody tiki doll carved out of human. Roy shouts at him to stop, weeping as Roy attacks his face again and again and again, clawing the skin off his own awful, distorted visage.